Welcome back to Northeast Legends and Stories, where we dive deep into the rich tapestry of New England's past, uncovering tales that have shaped its history and captured imaginations across generations. You know, the Northeast has always been a crossroads of exploration and expectation, a place where European maps promised riches that never quite materialized, leaving behind names and notions that linger like echoes in the fog, drawing adventurers and dreamers to scan the horizon for what might have been, even as the tides erase the old shorelines and winds scatter the charts. Today, we're exploring one of those elusive promises, the Golden City of Norumbega, a mythical metropolis of wealth and wonder, long associated with New England, particularly the coastal regions of Maine and Massachusetts, where rivers like the Penobscot have carried whispers of lost bounty for centuries, inviting sailors to linger longer than planned, their journals filling with half-heard words from native guides. This isn't a story of buried gold or lost tribes in the strict sense. It's the evolution of a name from Native American roots to a symbol of untapped bounty on Old World charts, fueling dreams from the 16th century to modern place names and literary revivals that still pull readers into imagined harbors under starlit skies. We'll trace its origins with the early explorers who first heard the word from Wabanaki canoes on calm bays, follow how it became tied to New England's rivers and bays through a series of maps and voyages that tested the limits of wind, wood, and willpower. Examine the romantic embellishments that turned it into a golden city through embellished tales and ambitious projections from cartographers' tables, and unpack why it persists in literature, local traditions, and even street signs today, alongside related tales like the Norse Vinland settlements that may have inspired similar myths of northern abundance amid the crashing waves. If you're sailing Penobscot Bay or flipping through antique maps in a Boston shop, this episode's for you. It's a grounded look at how a single term spun a web of aspiration across the region, drawn from explorer logs, cartographic records, linguistic studies, and native oral histories that remind us the land spoke first, its rivers murmuring secrets before any quill scratched paper. Let's set sail with Giovanni da Verrazzano and see where Norumbega takes us, starting with the first European ears to catch its sound on a distant shore, when the world was still flat at the edges. To understand Norumbega, we have to go back to the dawn of European exploration in the Northeast, a time when sailors sketched coastlines from hearsay and hope, filling blanks with names that blended curiosity, commerce, and a touch of wishful thinking amid the salt spray and uncharted shoals, where every inlet might hide a fortune or a freshwater stream to refill empty casks. The word first appears in written records in 1524 during the voyage of Giovanni da Verrazzano, an Italian navigator sailing for France under King Francis I, who sought new trade routes to rival Spain's grip on the Americas after Columbus's voyages opened the door but locked the key with monopolies on golden slaves. Verrazzano departed Dieppe in France in April 1523 with 4 ships, the Dauphine among them, a 40-ton caravel with a crew of 50 hardened seamen, tasked with finding a northwest passage to Asia, but he hugged the eastern seaboard instead, charting from the Carolina Capes northward in a commission to discover new lands and claim them for the French crown, with promises of furs and fish to tempt investors. His journey took him past the Outer Banks in March 1524, where he noted low sandy land and people in huts by the shore, then north to the Pamlico Sound, which he mistook for a sea route to the Pacific, before turning to the coast that would become New England, winds filling his sails as he navigated the shifting currents. On April 15, 1524, near present-day Rhode Island's Narragansett Bay, he encountered native people in dugout canoes who traded beaver furs, deer hides, and tobacco for Venetian glass beads, small mirrors, and bells from the ship's stores, the exchange lasting hours as the Dauphine anchored in shallow water. Verrazzano recorded the interaction in a letter to the king dated July 8, 1525, from his return in Dieppe, describing a land of great rivers and people in canoes who called their coastal home Norumbega. He didn't specify a city or golden spires. Norumbega was the land itself, likely a Wabanaki term from the Mi'kmaq or Abenaki languages for quiet place or place of the white pine, referring to the region's evergreen stands and serene bays that offered safe harbors for fishing and trade, where the water lay still enough for canoes to glide without disturbance, and the pines provided masts for future ships. Verrazzano noted the people as friendly and honest, their villages well stocked with fish and game, under palisades of sharpened stakes, with houses of bark and thatch where women wove baskets of sweetgrass. He sailed on after a week, bartering for more furs before heading to Nova Scotia, unaware his casual notation would seed centuries of speculation among mapmakers hungry for landmarks to guide the next fleet. Verrazzano's account sparked interest in French courts, where it was read aloud at the Fontainebleau Palace amid discussions of colonial ventures, with courtiers debating the great rivers as paths to Cathay. But it was his shipmate Antonio de Alaminos, the pilot, who carried the name to Spain upon returning via the Azores, where it appeared on a globe by Flemish cartographer Gemma Fritius in 1536, placing Norumbega as a river mouth in northern Virginia near the James River, a southward shift based on hearsay from Spanish pilots who heard Norumbega from Caribbean natives via trade routes that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the northern coasts, blending it with tales of the Rio de los Gatos, Cat Rivet, from Ponce de Leon's 1513 voyage. By 1550, the name evolved in French maps, with Pierre de Celier's world chart showing Norumbega as a cape near Boston Harbor, a simple geographic marker for navigators dodging the shifting sands of Cape Cod, where ships like the Sea Venture had wrecked in 1524, scattering cargo and survivors to warn of hidden dangers like the Horse Latitude's calms. De Celier noted great rivers flowing from the interior, echoing Verrazzano's land of great rivers, but still no city, just a coastal region of potential for cod fisheries and pine exports that could supply shipyards in Dieppe and Honfleur, with illustrations of canoes and fish weirs hinting at native abundance. The golden part crept in later, around 1559, when Spanish explorer Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vacas, tales of inland riches from his 1528 to 1536 march across the southwest, influenced chronicler Pedro de Medina, who described Norumbega as a region of great abundance in his Arte de Navegar, a sailing manual for Spanish pilots that spread through Seville's printing presses and reached French ports by 1562. This blended with native reports of copper trade along the Penobscot, where Wabanaki people bartered with Algonquin groups from the south, leading to whispers of cities with metal tools and shell beads that European ears twisted into tales of gold, especially as Medina noted rivers rich in minerals, from second-hand accounts of de Vaca's trek, where he saw houses of stone among the Pueblo, misremembered as northern. No explorer saw a city. Verrazzano traded with canoes holding 10 men each, not palaces with towers. But the name stuck as a placeholder for promise, a northern counterpart to the southern El Dorado myths that drove Pizarro's conquests in Peru, fueling French and English voyages in the mid-16th century as monarchs vied for American footholds amid the Treaty of Tordesillas' divisions. The association with New England solidified in the late 16th century when English cartographers latched onto Norumbega amid rivalry with Spain for North American claims, turning a vague cape into a tantalizing interior lure that hinted at trade empires beyond the visible horizon, with every new voyage adding details to the dream. In 1569, Flemish mapmaker Gerard Mercator's World Map, the first to show the full Americas based on his vast correspondence with sailors and scholars, depicted Norumbega as a sprawling region from Cape Cod to Newfoundland, with a river labeled R. Norumbega flowing into the Atlantic near Bangor, Maine. The Penobscot River, known to Wabanaki as Penobscot, meaning it flows on threading its way through the landscape of islands and bends that made navigation a test of skill. Mercator drew a city symbol, a turreted building with a flag, at the river's mouth, a European convention for important ports or trade centers, though no such place existed. It was his interpretation of Verrazzano's Great River and native villages like Pentagouet, Castine, Maine, where French explorer Samuel de Champlain would trade in 1604, exchanging iron tools for furs in a birch bark longhouse. Abraham Ortelius's 1570 map, the first modern atlas printed in Antwerp with over 50 copper plates, echoed this, adding Norumbega Regio as a province of rich lands, with fertile valleys and many rivers, possibly from sailor David Ingram's 1569 claim of walking from Cape Fear to Nova Scotia and seeing a city of gold with houses of crystal, likely exaggerated tales from his shipwreck survival in 1567. As Ingram was a known fabulist whose story was later dismissed by historians like Samuel Purchas in 1625, who labeled him a lying traveler. These maps influenced English settlers hungry for colonies. In 1630, Plymouth colony governor William Bradford referenced Norumbega in letters to London backers as the land's potential for fur trade and fisheries, tying it to New England's emerging identity as a Puritan haven with untapped wealth beyond the rocky farms, where every beaver dam hinted at a trade route to riches. By the 17th century, Norumbega shifted from a golden lure to a geographic anchor for New England, evolving from a mythical city to a practical label for rivers and bays that guided settlement and trade amid the growing English presence, with explorers' logs becoming the blueprints for colonies. John Smith's 1620 map of New England, drawn from his 1617 to 1619 voyages for the Virginia Company, labeled the Penobscot as Norumbega River, a practical rename for trade routes that English captains used to navigate from Massachusetts Bay to the Kennebec, where fur posts sprang up by 1628, with traders like William Bradford's son exchanging cloth for beaver pelts worth 20 shillings each in London. In 1636, Plymouth explorer John Oldham sailed the Penobscot, trading with Wabanaki and wigwams he called Norumbega's halls in his log, noting villages with goodly canoes and cornfields, but no gold, just beaver pelts worth a fortune in London hats and gloves, and he sketched the river's mouth with high lands for potential forts. The city faded, but the name endured in place lore. Boston's Norumbega Street appeared in 1692 land grants as a path for early settlers to access fresh water from the Mystic. A tavern in Cambridge, named the Norumbega Inn, by 1790 served as a hub for Harvard students swapping explorer yarns over ale and cider. And Maine's Norumbega Township was granted in 1838, a 6,000-acre tract near Bangor where settlers logged pines for shipmasts and cleared fields for potatoes, though the township dissolved by 1850 due to poor soil and harsh logging practices that stripped the hills bare. The Golden Myth resurfaced in Romantic literature as New England cultivated its identity amid the American Revolution and early Republic, with poets and historians using it to evoke a pre-colonial Eden. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's 1841 poem, The Skeleton in Armor, published in Ballads and Other Poems, imagined a Viking knight from Norumbega, a city of gold founded by Leif Erikson around 1002, blending Norse sagas, Saga of the Greenlanders, circa 1300, with Verrazzano's name to evoke a medieval harbor with towers and temples of timber and thatch. The knight's armor, rusted with brine, washed ashore in Newport. This Viking tie, popularized in 1879 by antiquarian Eben Norton Horsford's book Defense of the Objections to the Norse Discovery of America, placed Norumbega as a Norse colony at the Charles River mouth in Cambridge. Horsford even built a Norse temple replica there in 1883, complete with rune stones and a stone altar for mock rituals, funding excavations that unearthed native pottery but no Viking swords. Though debunked by archaeologists, no Norse artifacts east of Lanceau Meadows, Newfoundland, dated 1020, confirmed by Parks Canada digs in the 1960s and carbon dating in the 1970s. It romanticized New England as ancient, influencing Boston's Norumbega Towers Apartments in 1929 and the 1933 Viking ship replica in Fairleigh, Vermont, a full-scale Nor built for the Chicago World's Fair and sailed to the lake by horse teams. The legend persisted through the 19th and 20th centuries, fueled by New England's self-mythologizing as a cradle of exploration and reinvention, with Norumbega serving as a symbol of hidden potential in a region of granite quarries and whaling ports that turned to tourism and industry, each new generation adding a layer to the tale. In 1852, Maine historian William F. Poole's The Wild Northland, the story of a tour in the Great Lone Land, speculated Norumbega as a Penobscot trading hub for copper and shell beads, drawing from Wabanaki oral histories collected by Lewis Evans in his 1755 map, which showed Norumbega as native villages with great wealth in furs along the river's banks, where women wove baskets of sweetgrass and men carved canoes from birch. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago featured a Norumbega exhibit, with Maine artifacts like birch bark canoes and copper tools from Castine, drawing crowds to ponder lost wealth amid the fair's palaces of plaster and light, where replicas of native longhouses stood beside steam engines and Ferris wheels. Early 20th century tourism capitalized on the romance. The 1921 Norumbega Park in Norwood, Massachusetts, an amusement spot with a Viking roller coaster and midway games, closed 1968 due to suburban growth, hosted annual Norumbega Nights with lantern-lit boat rides on the Neponset River, and storytelling tents where guides recounted Verrazzano's canoes and Champlain's fur trades. In Maine, Bangor boosters in the 1920s promoted Norumbega excavations near the Penobscot by the Maine Historical Society, unearthing native tools misinterpreted as golden relics, actually copper from Wabanaki sites dated 1050, traded from Lake Superior by way of the St. Lawrence. Though the digs yielded only wampum beads and arrowheads, with reports in the Bangor Daily News sparking brief gold rushes among amateur diggers who combed the banks with pans. The Viking revival peaked in the 1930s with the Kensington runestone hoax in Minnesota, a supposed Norse artifact from 1362, debunked in 1954 by geological analysis, but echoed in New England claims like the Spirit Pond runestones in Maine, 1971 also forged, as confirmed by the Smithsonian in 1980. Fueling amateur societies like the Vinland Map Club in Boston, which met in the 1950s to debate Horsford's theories over maps and mead. Norumbega's persistence ties to related stories of mythical Northeast wealth, like the Norse Vinland, which may have seeded its golden aura through overlapping explorer tales that blended oral histories with ink. The Saga of the Greenlanders, circa 1300, describes Leif Erikson's 1002 voyage to Vinland the Good, a land of grapes and self-sown wheat, likely Lonso Meadows, Newfoundland, with archaeological digs uncovering Norse halls from 1020, including iron nails, a bronze pin, and a spindle whorl for wool spinning. Though 400 miles northeast, the saga's Markland in wooded coast matched Verrazzano's Great Rivers, inspiring Horsia's Cambridge colony theory and the 1965 excavations in Newport, Rhode Island, of a supposed Norse millstone, debunked as colonial by Brown University in 1967. Another echo is the Quivira myth from Coronado's 1541 expedition, a city of gold in Kansas plains that lured Spaniards north, paralleling Norumbega's riverine promise and influencing French maps like Champlain's 1607 chart, which labeled the Saco River Norumbega for its fur potential, after trading with Wabanaki at Saco in 1605, where he noted cabins of bark and women with baskets. These tales fed New England's self-image as a promised land. Puritan sermons in 1630 cited Norumbega as divine bounty, much like Bradford's 1630. Of Plymouth Plantation praised the wilderness as ripe for harvest, with early colonists like Edward Winslow in 1621 noting rivers full of fish near Norumbega's bounds during his Kennebec voyage. In modern context, Norumbega symbolizes resilience. The Penobscot Nation's cultural center in Indian Island uses the name for exhibits on pre-colonial trade, reclaiming it from European fantasy with displays of birch bark canoes and wampum belts from 1600, including a 1980 reconstruction of a trading post. It's in Maine's Norumbega Falls, now VZ Dam, a 1920 hydroelectric site with a plaque noting the name's Wabanaki roots, Bangor's Norumbega Street, a residential lane since 1692 lined with Victorian homes and a historical marker from the Maine Historical Society, in 2022, and Cambridge's Norumbega Towers, 1929 apartments with Viking motifs in the lobby mosaics, including rune-inspired tiles. The 2023 book Norumbega, The Myth and the Map by historian James Finney Baxter, revives it as a lens on indigenous cartography, tying Wabanaki star maps to Verrazzano's Quiet Place through Abenaki elders' stories collected in the 1930s by Frank Speck, a University of Pennsylvania anthropologist who documented Place of the Northern Waters in his 1945 Penobscot Man. Norumbega endures because it's New England's mirror, exploration's hope amid hardship, a name that honors the land's quiet strength while inviting us to wonder what lies beyond the next bend in the river. Perhaps a forgotten canoe or a mapmaker's dream waiting for the right tide. What makes Norumbega special is how it connects us to the voices before ours. The Wabanaki who named their bays for the way the water moved, the explorers who misheard but mapped with ink and ambition, and the storytellers who gilded the tale for fireside audiences under the same stars. In the Penobscot's flow or a Cambridge street sign, it's there, a thread from 1524 to today, pulling us to the water's edge to listen. That's our exploration of Norumbega, New England's phantom city of gold. If this sparked a map hunt or Maine road trip, share on socials. What's your region's lost legend? Until next time, keep charting the unknown. I'm your host, Mike D., signing off from the heart of New England. Stay exploratory, friends.